performance, and therefore must treat all members with respect, respond to sales needs. Be sensitive to the needs of the community. Again, a part of the process we were just going through of the values, the objectives, purposes. Okay, this ties back to some of the things we were looking at in part of the earlier presentations of what are the boundaries of our conversion unit. You know, who works on the cranes, the computers, that piece. What type of high-tech maintenance support do we need? Data input, invoices before shipments, computer interface, sampling, safety, projects, CARs, ER, and on with the other functions. How do we incorporate those into our conversion unit? And as we went back through and started breaking down task groups and boundaries, we were pretty much ended at that point last night of needing the guidance at this time. Which direction do we take? How do we interface a warehousing employee in our conversion group into the flow of jobs through that? How much specialties training can he have to be a computer troubleshooter one day, a picker the next day, or whatever that flow of jobs is, so that we can continue our flow in our primary function in the department.
Homer, from a sequence standpoint, did you do this before you did that, or do you do that before you did this?
We did this set last.
Right.
Okay, I think maybe if you can kind of stay with the sequence. If your flow chart, how about just kind of talk
Okay.
through what you did and what came out of it?
Okay, back into that then, we went through, after looking at the environmental, what the needs of our external environment were, started laying it out, taking the macro units that we would be going through in the plant and outlining those, looking at the first step being conveying from packaging. The conversion units in processing are finished with a product, have sent it through the wall to us, conveying from packaging, and looked at those variances that could occur. The equipment stops, production flow stops, box jams, transfer boxes, and what effect under the arrows does that have on the material? What are the material variances? These are processing equipment variances. Pretty much when we hit the warehouse, we begin to see one common element under material. We damage product, lose product, create product inventory variances. Went from that point to scanning on the belt. Same things could happen in relative terms. Scanner not being operable, box jams. Again, same damage to the product. Metal detecting, again, calibration of the detectors. What do the signals do to the diverter? Which way does it send the product? How do we control that piece?
Let me just kind of point out one thing. The first metal detector may read something, and you divert down the pick belt. Okay, and what happens if it gets to the second metal detector and that one's not as sensitive or not calibrated?
That's what we asked Rick. We think that stinks.
It goes on the truck.
Yes, and it's not a case that should go on the truck either. It could
Well, the other thing that was brought up on those same lines is there is a second scanning unit that comes off that pick line that goes out to the truck.
Yes.
We still, I
don't
don't
know
think
what it
have
does. I couldn't get a hold of
determined
Rick and-
what it does.
It says
Is that a counter?
Manifest.
Yeah, it's a counter. It was supposed to be a verification of the pick list.
Does it in fact identify the specific product then?
Yeah,
Okay.
it reads.
So it's a duplicate of the
labels.
first one
Is
then.
that the scanner they test in
It's
Vancouver
like
and in Irving?
it's like the one they tested in Vancouver. and
It's sort of like the same thing that
Kirby's taking theirs
when
off.
you go to the grocery store and has the optical scanner.
That's because they don't have.
Oh yeah, no,
Well,
what
we
we
have
were
two of them.
looking at, there were two
Yeah, you'll have
scanners.
one coming
We can
in.
get that.
You have one coming in, and that information needs
I
to
don't know
be
if we
fed
want that type.
to drive
Different.
your production numbers. To drive. The other one scanner is to drive what is exiting the warehouse and what will be then therefore charged on the sales.
So you're effectively
See,
two
Yeah,
of the same.
it's your shipping's buying it on one side and selling it on the other,
Right.
and it's got an optical scanner to count it for both sides.
Your way of verification reconciling.
What we didn't know yesterday was if they were the same, or was it just a counter? And
But that metal detector, we raised that question with Rick, that's just, that stinks. There's no way that's gonna work consistently. And they're gonna go back and they're going to look at that. See if we may want to divert it onto the pick belt and then stop it until they get 10 or 12 of these things built up, and then the pick guy be responsible to let those go through as a slug, knowing they should be diverted.
Pick belt guy wouldn't know either.
They'd be stopped right at the start of where he would start his picks.
Is it gonna be
I don't know how we'd
diverted
get them through,
if
but
it has
not to let them go
miscontamination?
in just on their own.
Problem. Will it be diverted off to another rack? And
Yeah, it
put
gets
over like
diverted
an
off.
old area?
No, it gets diverted off to another belt, which ties into the pick belt, and then it follows the pick belt all the way around to another metal detector, which hopefully will read it. And the idea was that the second one would read it and divert it off.
That would be
There's
the
a
place
pusher
to pull it off, right?
and divert it off.
That's the only place to
One
get
of
it
the
off.
things we could, see, the problem we had was that the first metal detector is like at 15 feet in the air. And I said, look, I don't want the belt to stop, because that means you gotta run up and, well, we hadn't even figured out a way how to get up there yet. At that time, we've now put in a catwalk, but at the time when we were struggling with this, I said, look, I wanna get that case out of there without stopping the whole single case conveyor. And that was the idea, we divert it down and then pick it up with another metal detector.
Okay. But now if it
So I'll take
passes
credit
through
and
the other,
blame, but.
if it passes through the other metal conveyor, it goes actually onto the trailer?
No, no, if it passes through.
Yeah, so you're
Yes,
saying,
it
your
would.
question was if they're not calibrated exactly.
All right,
So then therefore it'll be an overshipment too then?
right, that's right.
Possibly it'll be something they didn't necessarily order.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's what I'm saying,
That's right.
overshipment, so that will confuse the driver because he won't know what to do with it.
Plus it may have metal in it.
That's right.
And then it'll have metal in it to boot, yeah.
No limits. Okay.
As we went through yesterday, we saw a lot of those things that could happen, metal detecting, foreign material contamination, inventory reconciliation problem that is created. Then took it to the next step of pick belt diverting, and looked at all those possible variances, diverter being programmed wrong, finding the foreign material in the box, malfunctions. Then again, the same thing to the product, foreign material down to the carousel, box jams, damages the product, etc. Next place is carousel diverter, where you can have problems with damaged product there. On out to palletizing, and then we start getting into variances away from product related to damage, more no boards, sequence delivery malfunctions, or sequence device malfunctions, carousels are inoperative, bad boards, splintering boards, how do we get those out of there in a timely manner, how do we dispose of them, etc. Discharge sensors are inoperable.
And what's that discharge sensor?
Those doors
Where-
are open. Make those two sensors.
Or operator error, and we looked at operator error being in terms of backing up to possibly contaminated, getting on the belt, no labels, the question of what's going to happen to a case if the label comes off, the label is misread, does it come on down, and the operator palletizes it, giving us another inventory variance,
Or
mixed product, no ID.
a technical point on this analysis, a major side stream like pallet side streams probably ought to be flow charted and a variance analysis made on that also.
Okay.
Any major side streams need to be flow charted, same kind of a thing.
So you're saying you pull palletizing out and that kind of
I
goes
just
through?
go this flow chart because palleting, pallets come from someplace and they go someplace, and from looking at your
Add it to our list.
design, it looked pretty complex, the whole pallet handling thing. And it's worth, I think, worth flow charting.
Okay. From that point, we're on to the first transferring, where R2D2 comes in. Next is pickup, and we have to look, are the robo carriers inoperable? What's programmed in to prevent collisions? What does the speed do as far as dumping cases? And then a damaged robo carrier out of the loop. Again, our material variances, damaged cases, inventory variances, pallets possibly fall, damaging several cases. wood?
Just mine.
You've seen this.
From that point, the strapping and weighing, again, some of the same variables. The strapper's inoperable, the scale's inoperable, operator error. An operator releases the pallet into the system, and the robo-carrier takes off with it while the strapping machine is still strapping, and tears a layer of product off the pallet. Again, more damage, misaligned pallets.
Okay, another technical point, when you do variance analysis, I suggest you skip any kind of operator error stuff, because what you're gonna do is design an organization specifically to try and reduce the possibilities of operator errors. So if you can recognize that you can make an error, but right now stay mostly with equipment, materials, and flows, and then design to avoid the operating errors.
Okay, and that's one thing we were struggling with on our own yesterday, Herb, is trying to decide, where is that boundary? Is it operator or equipment? Because the operator causes the equipment to malfunction in some manner. Is it people or is it equipment related?
Well, it's looked at as that the operator's function is to control variances, and so you're trying to design in information processes, training, detection points, all of these things. And the whole purpose of this is to minimize the possibility of operator error. So typically, don't assume operator errors yet until you've, in effect, tried to design them out. I don't mean you make anything idiot-proof, but the purpose of this is to stick mostly with material, equipment, and processes, then come back through your control charts, come up with schemes that will essentially minimize the potential for operating error.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. If we stay away from expecting operator errors, we don't have operator errors.
That's what we're trying to do.
Okay. Okay, then we move it down to the system inputting. Have a wrong description keyed in.
So that's the same thing then again.
Right, basically that.
But the inoperable terminal would be
a major possibly. That's something that came out. Do we need to have a spare terminal on hand? We just plug back in and get us back online. Can we input from another station? How does that piece tie in? And again, creates inventory error in the material. Transferring starts getting a little fuzzy here. We went in and tried to decide how to break that out with the variables we're given. Because if that transferring, we can go to a straight loadout, or we can go to the SRS system. If we go to a straight loadout, then we go down and look at it in terms of a direct loadout or a loadout after we have retrieved the product from the high rise and listed those variables. Again, the different equipment failures, crane system, manual backup system fails, power failures, pallets fall as it's going through. Again, same thing with damage cases, inventory variances. If we break off on the direct loadout or the retrieving of the cases of full pallets, we go down to the transferring, which is the same variables as before in transferring, to index conveying, what problems are there with the rollers, indexing lights, those controls. Again, product damage with pallets, with spills, damaged product. We go to loading, and the other variables there, the walkie stacker could be a problem, the ball transfers, transfer conveyors, which go into the trucks, what are the variables in that, how the product is stacked on those. The end result could be, again, damage with the product falling out.
What about the trailer itself? Where did you show its variances within the trailer?
We stopped at that point.
Okay.
We looked at it as having the product in the warehouse all the way through and out the door as it went to the trailer.
But not on the trailer.
Right.
I would suggest you go ahead and finish it, because it seems like it's not a very easy place to break your analysis with it on the trailer, because you probably got a natural boundary once it's loaded.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still within our control. We're putting it on. Putting it on the truck.
And the various trailers, beds, roller beds.
That way you can look at variances in trailers, and these are variables all the way from, condition to size to
We have to make sure you
types
use
to
the right
whatever.
trailer for the right load.
Right.
Yeah, 'cause that'll affect us.
Yeah.
that loop, we're back up to the high-rise storage, retrieving for picking. And through those, we retrieve the wrong product code, damaged cases, production shuts down, we don't have the right product, those variables. Picking, pick belts inoperable, and this is another one back to human error, picking accuracy. The results, incorrect product loaded, inventory areas.
On picking, one other item you might put up there is out of product, product not available, okay? And there are a couple of other things I think that fall under there that might just be activities, and one is you gotta get rid of empty pallets off the belts. So you might just add in a few more items.
I think we start to die at this point, and going through and talking about all the other variables. Look at conveying on out, what happens where the lower deck and the upper deck of the pick belt merge, those possible variables. Again, the bottom line is inventory errors, product damage, metal detecting, back up to the same thing, the variables of does it or doesn't it catch the contaminated product, what happens to that product, does it just go to the end of that belt and sit there if the pick belt's not running, what is the stopping point, what accumulation areas
Just
do we need?
another point on doing the analysis, if you can from the vendor, learn what the variances in the metal detector themselves are. What variances can you expect that could actually cause it's not operating the way it's supposed to operate? And those would normally be listed under that conversion step.
There's just
Up there,
basically
number one.
adjustments, there's phase adjustments and
Okay.
correct, proper maintenance
Yeah,
to
he's
maintain
got
that.
Up here,
Yep.
under step 2.
Okay.
or
We
step
can do that
Mhm.
without even calling.
Then we did pretty much the same thing, scanning, and we had the questions on what that scanner actually does. What variances could we get in that, and didn't have that answer, and couldn't get it from any of the engineering people yesterday afternoon. Then the final step we used again as loading, with the product stacked in the trailer, what's proper on that, again, damage, inventory variances coming from that. Then what we did was go back to the receiving piece to see how that tied into the conversion unit. Looking at material and trailers coming in
This finished product?
as finished product, seasoning, roll stock, generically everything being received. Again, damaged, unloading, blind receivers filled out, bad pallet boards again, the availability of pallet boards being the variable. Again, damaged product, transferring, we looked at that as being the context we were using yesterday, basically the same steps and same variances as transferring in the rest of the warehouse, robo-carrier problems, etc. On down to sampling. When we got to sampling, we just listed technique because we started getting into some of the warehouse support tasks. Is that part of the warehousing conversion unit? Is that a boundary where the processing for QA conversion group starts overlapping?
Okay, in this particular case, what you do is assume that there is no such animal as an external group. And the sampling thing, if that has to be done in order to make a decision, and now in order to allow something to proceed to another step, you take it just like a normal conversion process. You sample it, you analyze it, you make a judgment based on the analysis, and then you do something else. So you keep that right in the flow stream.
You may decide later that it comes out.
Later on you may change your mind, but right now it's an integral part of the flow stream.
Okay. From the sampling technique variances, come into the material variance, either reject or accept it. Flows into storage. The question of 4-way pallets, is that a good point to eliminate that variance, to deal with that variance? From there, again, damaged to the storage system. Where is that at this point? What are the variables? Putting seasoning into the high rise, to the other storage areas, again, damage. And then we get to the transferring again, having the same variables, but this looks like a boundary, questionable boundary, does this become, before or after the transferring a conversion unit responsibility to transfer their own products from the warehouse to their processing area? Or is that still a receiving warehousing function to make that transferring?
You're saying if, the potato chip processing area needs seasoning, and theoretically you might have it in the warehouse, who does the transfer? Is that
Right.
the question?
Right. Is the robo operation, turret lift operation part of their conversion unit, or still a part of my conversion unit? What determines that boundary?
Yeah, if this, at this stage, if it's not clear about boundaries, just put a question mark. It looks like it's a bounding point, a transfer point, but just put a question mark and do whatever analysis you need to do to answer the question.
That'd be the same thing with Katie's and Rollstock.
Right.
And the variety pack issues, how that functions in the physical restraints. Before we did,
Let me ask you, did you all see that as a part of the warehouse operation, or did you see it as a separate conversion unit, or just where did it fall?
Didn't really get into it. We've heard of it and talked about it, and maybe kind of like the pay scale. Generalists and specialists, we've seen something there, so we want to look at it. We've heard that variety pack might be in the warehouse, and why? We want to look at it, but we haven't really. You know, from a proximity standpoint, it's in packaging.
Okay.
From you've got to get your materials out of the warehouse, loose back in. To do that, it might be the warehouse. Plus, it gives the people in the warehouse something other to do, change the pace.
What would be that?
Let me make a technical design point. At this stage, ideally, you're only looking at technical systems and just totally ignoring any organizational questions as to who does what. What you're trying to do is to track the entire conversion process, look at variances within that flow stream from the beginning to the end, look for potential breakpoints within the technical system, but just to kind of keep this process clean, don't worry about whose it is or where the accountability is.
Sure.
Until you get into organization design. In other words, when you start drawing your social system boundaries, that's when you begin that kind of analysis.
But there is I understand what you're saying, but there is a task that has to be done in both carton sorting and variety pack. And certainly there's some technical systems involved in both.
But I'd say just keep right on flow charting them until you reach some kind of a point where you're dropping off the edge of the world. In other words, if it's a piece of that, if it's a kind of an integral piece of that system, highly interdependent, regardless of where it's located or who does it now, I'd flow chart it to show its relationship to the total system.
And that should help us.
Yeah, then when you go in and make your boundary decisions, you have all this data to help you make the decisions.
So we need to flow chart for carton sorting.
Exactly. The whole KD process, almost from the beginning to the end, needs to have a flow chart to show the variances, particularly since, listening yesterday, the damage and all of these kind of things that can occur. Where do they occur? What are the equipment or processing conditions that cause it to occur? All of these questions need to be given the same care that you've given this.
okay. From that point, we went down to identifying natural breakpoints where we could measure the efficiencies of different conversion units. And again, this was a very good learning experience for us yesterday, because we were trying to determine, in terms of a conversion group, what are breakpoints, work units, etc. We looked at the incoming cases through the point of scanning in the warehouse and decided that to be our first measurable breakpoint. Looking at it in terms of inventory control, we can tell how many cases were produced by taking a reading from that scanner. Then we go all the way through detecting, diverting, more diverting, palletizing, and look at that as another control point for inventory. We've talked a little bit about if we've got damaged cases from this point to that point, or a problem with a scanner read, how do we reconcile our inventory? Looking at designing our system right now, with possibly a manual recheck at palletizing. We thought that was a good break point. Went from there through transferring, strapping, weighing, and considering the variables of damaging cases through the strapping weighing operation, back to another checkpoint at system inputting, where we're inputting that and we get another reading of how much material is going in the warehouse, with the variance primarily being material damage, loss, etc. Then we took it down to the step of transferring a direct load or bulk loads, roller bed loads out of the warehouse for the fourth and fifth, again using inventory measurements as the primarily break point, and at the same time looking at how do we measure cases handled per hour, cases per man hour, pounds per hour, etc. And using the same logic for the picking sequence. We kicked around, do we establish this break point after picking or after the loading in the trailer? Historically, it's pretty much guided after picking, since the picker is controlling what time he's out there on the belt and how many cases through using his pick list that he has loaded in that time. And that gives us some monitoring of that total system so that we have established those break points. From
Okay.
that,
Let me just question a couple things. If I understand what you're saying, the break points you've established might decide work groups or span of control?
No,
Yes.
it's amazing, how does that read there?
it says the points in the flow where there are natural break points where conversion efficiencies could be measured.
Okay.
And
I
that's what-
thought you had said something about the work group. Okay.
We kicked that around and looked at it and had to get our heads clear on whether the break points were number of people to do from this point to that point, and then we went back and decided it was a conversion efficiencies, as I said, with the inventories and tracking how many cases per hour, per pound, whatever unit we want to measure this performance in for this step in.
I suppose you had broken it down differently. You started off looking at where things impacted inventory. Suppose you had looked at it from the standpoint of where cases are handled differently. Where might you break this thing?
Now, the thing we did on that, we went back to the task force work that had been done with PC conversion, and so where the conversion unit takes potato chip processing all the way through packaging at this point, and they broke it down into processing packaging groups because of primarily the size of the work groups, to keep them in controllable units. Not having gone through and done the specific task details and analyzed how many bodies are from here to the trailer, we didn't feel comfortable with taking that as in being able to put those boundaries for the work groups or the units in at this point.
Plus, in cases handled, most of these steps are where they're either physically handled or the technology is there that they're handled, they're counted. The scanning, that tells you what's happening and quantity. Palletizing is physically handled.
The reason I asked about cases handled is because some of your flow streams break as a result of some case handling operation. The palletizing is a flow stream that's separate. Pick building is a flow stream that could be separated.
And that's kind of where we.
That kind of wound up there.
Yeah.
Inputting is a place where a person
Inputting,
gets involved, and
yeah,
that's where we've got to break.
Yeah. I was just wondering, like if I took this thing on a case handling basis, I would probably take it all the way up to pick belt diverting. At that point, something can happen to the case. One step beyond where you have it. Something can happen to the case. It can either go to the carousel or it can go down the pick belt.
Right.
That would probably be the only difference that I would show in terms of what you all have done versus.
Right.
But when you break it from an inventory standpoint, it logically falls right where you have it. Okay.
Then looked at the warehouse support task, trying to decide all of this flow, what items were in conversion unit of warehousing, which unit, what would be external support task? Still inside on high-tech maintenance. How much is within the conversion unit? How much is done?
Well, let me again suggest at this stage, all you're worried about is what's got to be done. You're not worried about whether you do it yourself or contract it out.
Okay.
But if you got to have high-tech maintenance, it goes on the list. If you got to have, programming competencies, it goes on the list. Everything that's got to be done to support that conversion process from the beginning to the end needs to be listed. Then your second cut is what do you want to retain control over, in other words, keep it within the boundaries, versus what do you want to contract out and let somebody else do. So at this stage, I'm again trying to argue, don't worry about boundaries or task allocation. Be sure you know what support work's got to be done,
Just list
regardless of who does it. That's the second stage of design.
Just kind of a hindsight 2020, or one of the things I thought about after we put this list together was that maybe we needed it to be in a little more detail, because we just outlined pretty general stuff. Well, what the fuck's a unit?
Well, it's just that could be a heading. Under high-tech maintenance, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
Under data input, what you
We
talking
probably
about?
need to go back and cut one more time.
Very much so. Because you need that information for designing training, for selecting people, assigning people.
Right.
Okay.
And like I said, headings all the way through high-tech, data input, whatever that entails, invoices, sampling, invoices for shipments, computer interface, sampling, how much is a QA in that part, safety, projects, ER, sales, distribution interface, purchasing, training, outside contracts, which encompasses computer contracts, pallet disposal, people take them off our hands for firewood, KD sales, sanitation. Now that's the
I can suggest you might want to add another, and that's, you had high-tech maintenance, there is just maintenance. A lot of, I don't want to say high and low, but it's just normal maintenance stuff on HVAC systems, conveyor systems that are, just normal roller conveyor type things, which would be a support activity that has to include. Maybe just another heading if you want to break it out that, in that kind of detail.
Okay. Ready to go back and look at the things Mike said we wanted to accomplish this morning. Where are we going from now? What are the needs at this point? We've got questions we need answered, direction from her. So we take this and we go on and finish this entire process. We get down to our task, to the whole scope of this thing.
This has been an extremely helpful handout. Like to have seen that on Monday. That was easier, going A, B, C, D.
As long as you recognize my dilemma, people fuss when I give them too much. They fuss when I give them too little. And so we're going to have to, as we go through and continue taking this stuff through the corkscrew, is you decide what's right at what point in time based on your experience. So we can actually meter this stuff out about that point in time which you think you really needed. Does that? Okay.
Do you have the bigger packets? I kept hearing about this 3-inch package. Do you have any more of those?
I think so. I checked with the secretaries. They ran, I thought, enough copies for everybody, but they may not have.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought
The reading assignments.
Yeah.
The members can get involved in almost all the activities that occur in the plant. And I think the more knowledge you have about what's happening in another function, the better you are at getting involved and assisting the other functional groups in doing what they have to do, especially when it comes to something that impacts you. So if you understand what they have to do, and you go through the learning process with them, it's easy for you to become involved, as opposed to it becoming a meddlesome task, meddling in somebody else's business. I would rather have a process where we seek involvement from the other members. So as you bring successive waves of people in, we would like to continue the cross-functional involvement. Again, the accountabilities that we will assign to each department will pretty much spell out what you're supposed to do on a daily basis. Accountability should keep some other guy from treading on your turf too much. But the objective with regard to getting people involved in making decisions should be a part of the process of your bringing people on. So
That's why we left KD sorting and variety pack.
That's right. That's right. Give those bastards something to do. Okay. So I think we
Homer's specific direction.
I think we met that objective. You know, it's kind of interesting that you know, we could go off and specialize and say, Homer, the warehouse is yours. Go do it. But it's good to have Jim Ranton knowledgeable of what's going on in the warehouse, and Andy knowledgeable of what's happening out there. And of course, Vito's going to have to be. But the more knowledge you have of the other guy's operation, I think the better off you are when problems come up, especially when it requires some empathy. Mike's not going to overload poor Homer because he understands that that single case conveyor can only do certain things. Okay, the other objective was to raise commitment. We wanted to push through the process because you know, you could have taken the document that the PAC committee generated and said, okay, well, we'll use that, okay? And a lot of work was put into that. But we felt that going through the process helps to get your commitment up. And I was particularly interested in a statement 6 charts back where you all did indicate some commitment raising. You know, you indicated that and we're buying into some of these concepts, and that's exactly what we wanted you to do. By not, if you had not gone through the process, it would still be kind of mysterious and kind of fuzzy, and you know, it's, yeah, some of it makes sense, but a hell of a lot of it doesn't. And so until you kind of go through this thing, I think you will find that the commitment is relatively low, and then your understanding of it raises as you learn more about the process, and then the commitment goes up.
Well, let me just
Involved commitment. Another objective was to get you all into some action. I mean, actually get you into determining what we have to do next. There's still a very heavy task orientation among all of our groups, and we want that. That should not end. We want it after, though, you understand what the hell the task should be, okay? We want you to go out and work your asses off after you understand what it is you're working against. So don't lose that task orientation. And one of the objectives we had was that you all, by going through this process, begin to list some actions, you know, and start to assign some dates against what it is we need to do. Now, I've seen some of that, and I think a hell of a lot more of that has to occur. The learning process, all this stuff has to kind of converge or be brought into one package. And I think when we start to move toward that, or as we start to move toward that, we'll see more action plans being generated so that you can go off and Jim Ranton can finally do something, you know, that he can sink his teeth into. The bottom line of all of the things that, you know, we're getting at right now is we're developing activities that get us to pre-start, or through the pre-start period, up to June 26th, okay? And some of that means I gotta charge off and do something, okay? Means that somebody's gotta make some calls, we gotta get some procedures down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So one of our objectives was to, let's kind of get into that action mode as we go through this process. Light bulbs come on. I hope you all have been making notes about things I need to do, something that I need to plan, or something I just need to write down procedurally. The last thing I had as an objective was to document activities, and that's kind of all the stuff around here. As a part of the ongoing process of bringing new members in, and this, you know, I hope goes out 10 years or 20 years or whatever the life of the plan is, we continue to document activities so that successive waves, we'll be able to read the book and add to the volumes and determine what it is we did and why we did it. Helps to bring them up to speed, makes it a little easier for them, and also helps to bring a little bit of discipline to this process. Okay, the 3 o'clock call yesterday afternoon was an afterthought with regard to you know, the process needs to be structured, and calling at 3 o'clock was you know, my attempt to get you to let's document this thing so you don't lose it. Okay, as these rolls and sheets get tossed in the trash, I would still like to have a document that you can flip back to that shows February 6th through 11th, and here are the activities. Okay, and so we got that. All right. So we met our objective. Those were my objectives, Herb's objectives for this activity, and I feel that they've been met. I think the work has been excellent. The output or the product really was not what you flipped through this morning. The product for us was the process you went through. You know, that sure you got some tangibles from it, but again, process is the product.
But you know, that exposure may be limited to knowing what those 3 letters meant, and I guess maybe the key learning is that through a process like this, you can pretty much change your values or what you think you can accomplish in a different way and accomplish it better. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I think people that weren't even familiar with what we were talking about in HPS have within a week or two pretty much bought off on that as being a real viable way to do what we want to do here.
Could we test that with the newcomers like Homer and Vito and others and
Yeah, I think that's true.
Glenn?
I've only been here 3 days, but you know, I can see already that you go through a deprogramming stage of where, you know, I came down here with the thought of what it would be. All right, you know, I know what Williamsport was like, and I know what other plants were like, and you come down here and you think, well, this is what it's going to be like. It's not true. It's going to be altogether different, and it's very exciting what's going to happen with HPS and the general specialist concepts. And I think Bob hit it on the head when he said the commitment was one thing that, you know, stuck out. The high degree of commitment within this group is very outstanding. You see that very well.
Sometimes you just see the negative part of you question whether there is commitment. Yeah. It's kind of somebody comes in fresh and says, well, you know, I see a lot of that there. Maybe not enough yet, but a lot more than I expected. So.
What have you done?
You know, what we did have done coming in, and the things that Bob said, I think the major thing that we have done is getting acclimated to the HPS system. What is that? Herb and I have had a few side conversations on how you go from your conventional thinking that's ingrained through ever how many years, and how intent of the different management styles. Being able to break away from that into HPS to a pure team concept, if you will. I think that groundwork has been done the last 2 weeks. In my case specifically, you know, as I go through various terminology that has been ingrained, I go back to, you know, I know what I mean, but that's not the terminology we want to take into the team concept in Casa Grande to have high performance, so that we don't go in and teach bad habits, that we go in and eliminate those variances which cause problems as we start up the plant. I see that as being a major thing we have done. The other things, we have gone in and looked at organizationally how we want to develop our team, our players, so that we do those things and use those concepts. More specifically, going to the warehouse, which I bounced back from very traditional, trying to get non-traditional, and get that on track. And that's been difficult, not so much from the startup and the pre-startup work, but looking at 3 years down the road, thinking we're going to maybe 4 or 5 managers down to a 3 or 2 manager team, in the warehouse and how that interfaces with the rest of the plant and where we go from there. And, you know, how feasible is that? How much of a sale? Those are some of the things we've done. You know, I think in doing that, as Bob was saying, we tend to lose sight and it gets fuzzy and you're like a saturated sponge, you absorb so much and you're really wondering if it's all there. And you go and look at it and say, you know, the group's still committed, we're still on track more than we think. What are the results, have been the results? I think it's been a learning experience. I think it's been a test of the commitment of the people coming on board. Will it work? How do we make it work? What are the time frames? What's the mix of players we need to make that happen? What are the mix of the hourly employees? I think the results have been becoming cognizant of those needs. Why did we get these results? Because Kurt's there pushing us. And not so much that as I think why do we get those results? Because we all brought our war stories to the group with us. You know, I've seen this happen as a result of that, and I can relate to forcing it down to the hourly people. You know, at this time in my career, I had this person who took care of everything, and we as a team didn't have to worry about going in and managing that. Those are some of the things. I think that's why we got some of those results. Is that sharing of the group and having that commitment level in the group. What we've learned is that we have absorbed a lot of material, that there's a hell of a lot of material out there to absorb, and that we've got to maintain that commitment in this intense learning level. How do I want to say that? The intense learning at the rate we're going to be ready for startup and to continue to absorb that learning on into pre-startup with the commitment level that we're going to go into future state as we plan it.
Noticed is that as you get more involved in it, it starts to make more sense, and you wonder, well, why haven't we done this before, or why didn't we, package it this way before? And that's kind of the question I've asked myself. And as I see each one of you all coming in and going from very fuzzy to a little less fuzzy, and with momentum rising, I wonder and get concerned: are we programming you, or is this happening naturally? I'm hoping, of course, that it's all happening naturally, that you really are buying in, and you see that there are some real possibilities to the system that we're trying to put together here. So that's kind of my dumping off about a cynical concern that hopefully you're not being led into something that you really don't understand or agree with. And if in fact you are being, it's time to back up and say, oh, let's kind of talk about this.
I think it's a combination because we're buying in slowly with traditional Frito-Lay is that execution, task orientation. Put me in, coach, I don't smoke.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that needs to get done, you go do that. So we're hearing and you start out, yeah, we can do that. We don't know how, but it sounds good. And as we start tying the pieces together, you get more into more of the, why hasn't this been done? It's another task that needs to be completed with the total buy-in.
One of the things I'm concerned about is right along the line that Wally, those of you who now have been around 2 weeks, it's the whole notion of brainwashing. I mean, you be subjected to this stuff to the point that you may or may not be independently choosing to go this way.
You go through stages of that. I look at Vito after a week, and I see in my mind, maybe I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for you, but some maybe, just not quite sure, and I can remember when I felt that way. And I don't know if I'm brainwashed or not, but I over that first week and a half or so, I kind of felt, I don't know, it sounds good, but there's a whole lot more to it, and just roll it out and let's get started on it, I guess is how I felt the first week. And now I feel that, that we can get there, and it sounds good to me. It's going to make work a whole lot more fun, I guess, is one of the keys.
I think it's important to have a norm that says it's okay for you to say, hey, today I think this is a biggest bunch of crap I've ever seen, and I just can't make this work for myself. So you have someone who is taking up that role that keeps challenging you to rethink those things.
That's right, that's right. Yeah, it's very, very important for you to express those concerns, because what we've seen in the process, especially during the workshop that we had back in September, October, whenever it was that the guys who kind of slowed us down a bit did us a good deed, in that the more liberal ones of us were going to go off and create utopia, and probably get to the wall and not be able to scale it. And we found that there were some people in the group who managed to give us a more real-world perspective and made us rethink some things that we were wanting to do or some directions we were heading in. So, we've kind of tried to reiterate that to this group as you all are bringing more people in. I think you need to challenge them and make sure and test their understanding and commitment, and make sure that they are giving you not only the positive but the negative side of whatever it is we're moving toward, so that you can hear both viewpoints and that you can get those inputs that make you develop plans against the contingency. This guy may very well have a good point. We might not want the warehouse team to do board level repair. And I think somebody's already agreed to that and said that. So, but it may be very possible that we could go down a road where we say, hey, they ought to do it all. And not examine the reality of whether they can in fact do it all. So, as you guys are going through, one of the important things to me, and I hope to all of you, is that we hear pros and cons, and that we're not necessarily leading you or misleading you.
Sometimes those questions are just the fact that they hadn't caught up yet.
Yeah.
And not that it's
That's
a
right.
question.
That's right. And one of the things that I've seen even with this group, and we saw with other groups, is that there tends to be we want to rush on ahead, and kind of disregard the fact that this guy is sitting back there saying, and we don't necessarily allow them to speak. So when you see a guy fidgeting, or if he's clearing his throat and he needs to say something, you have to have a mechanism for encouraging that statement, bringing it out, pulling it out. It's not necessarily that he's going to slow you down, but he just very well may have an important point that'll keep you from going off the wrong direction.
I'm particularly interested in your reactions, because I'm assuming that you've spent a good part of your life dealing with the technology, mostly, of organizations. What's happened to you is you almost were forced, whether you wanted to or not, to get into the organization. But kind of what's happened this past week and a half.
After I found out what was going
Yeah. You know what you did, but what's happened to you?
That truck would make it.
The driver was trying to tell you something.
No, I think going through the whole training program that we did, at first I thought, when we sat down and started trying to go through that whole PC matrix and the variances and everything else, that, what are we doing this for? Somebody else has already done all their homework, has gone through the whole operation, done it in quite a bit of detail. Why are we going through it again? And the way it turned out, the reason we were going through it again was to use it as a learning process, to where we did have somebody that had already laid out the structure of how it was to be done, or the logical way to accomplish it. And then in reviewing what they did, doing any minor modifications or changes or updating it to tailor it more for what we as a group thought this plant should be like 3 years down the road. We learned how to accomplish that process. And then when we branched off and hit UTC, we took it off on not exactly the same way that the PAC group did PC, but we went through a flow diagram which felt a lot more comfortable for those of us that were trying to lay this whole thing out. And that process, we accomplished the same end results we did it in a way that made us feel more comfortable, and I think got us to the end result a little faster than in going the way the PAC group did on PC. And when we rolled into the warehouse, I think it went even faster. We were able to do it with fewer people after the initial flow chart of that department. When we broke off into the subgroups, we were able to go through, accomplish all the key points that we were trying to make, and before the end of last night, with Homer, we wound up taking a conventional department, which is what we started originally constructing, and revised that into a high-performance work group that, for all practical purposes, the team members were taking on a lot of the jobs that would have normally been handled by people in other departments or by their supervisors, or in some cases their managers. And it became a team effort, or the work group, and the effort they could put out, they could accomplish a whole lot more with much fewer people, and actually wind up, from the way we've got it laid out with circulating through different tasks and jobs they would have to do, probably be a whole lot happier in doing it.
Any concerns about the level of detail the work group might be going into?
The level of detail we've gone through, I missed part of that. Well, I missed the one whole day on the engineering and tech services piece, which I picked up a little bit of it yesterday, and got back into in detail with the warehouse going through with Homie yesterday. But the level of detail that we're at now, I think is a logical place to be. One of the things that I keep reverting back to, and that's from a whole lot of years of doing it, is that's fine. 3 years down the road, that's nice. How are we going to get that damn plane up and running in 2 months?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right.
Andy, you've been involved a little longer. My sense was you came in already kind of favorably disposed. In other words, you might have already been biased. But what's kind of happened to you?
My initial introduction to it was the 20th meeting. I certainly walked away from that meeting confused. Would be a very, very good word.
Liberal.
Yeah. But I had some time between the 20th and getting back down here to talk to some more people and do some reading and take a look at what that whole process was all about. So when I came here at the 6th and we started into the PC matrix and then into the UTC, that I was felt pretty comfortable. And as for myself, as the week went on, I felt like I moved very quickly into now I finally understand what we're trying to get to. But it was probably Wednesday or Thursday of last week until the lights started coming on, and I was beginning to see that that's the way we ought to be, and we can get there. So, I still think that as Vito's saying, the questions that we still have remain to be, this system looks really, really good. The concepts are tremendous. We're sure going to feel a lot more comfortable when we're 3 or 4 months into it, and we're actually doing the things that we're laying out. Because right now they're concepts.
You had an interesting experience on, I guess, the 6th. Hillman and Adrian came in, and you had the task of trying to explain to them what it is we were going to do.
Yeah, especially with Hillman Giles.
Yeah, kind of tell us about what happened with that.
Hillman has been with Frito-Lay, I guess, for 17 years, whatever it is, something like that, and he's now the manager of the field quality assurance people. And, he came in, and Hillman walked in with his punch list of the things that we need to do, and what I'm going to do, and what he's going to do for us. And, very, very traditional, and certainly didn't fit a whole lot of the direction that we were heading. So in probably about 30 or 45 minutes that afternoon, I tried to bring Hillman up to where we had been for the first few days in the 20th, and with the PAC group that found out that was going to be an impossible task, because Hillman was just shaking his head and
Yeah.
was visibly upset at the direction in which we were going. So, and after that afternoon, we spent about 4 or 5 hours in my room that night trying to lay out what the kind of what the game plan would be from a corporate quality assurance standpoint, what they needed to be doing. I think.
Was he concerned about QC policing the operation versus production monitoring their own process? And
That, sure, exactly what it was. What do you mean these guys are gonna do all their CPM analysis?
Who's gonna keep them honest?
Production people you're talking about here.
I've seen them. It was that immediate reaction of, we can't trust those guys. There's no way we can do that. We've gotta keep our hands right around it. But after our conversation that evening, he felt, I think, a little more comfortable with it and understood that we weren't really changing anything. We were just changing the task assignments and putting them really where they belonged. So he left feeling a lot better. But and I'm sure he's still struggling with some.
I believe he was a plant manager.
Oh yes, he was a Salisbury. So he struggled with it, but I think he feels pretty good about it now. Hopefully he does.
So when I came in and got into this, I guess 2 key learnings. One was most impressed with the commitment level of the group. And although some people were apprehensive, they were willing to, well, let's think about it, let's talk through that, convince me that this is something we want to do. So I felt good about that. The other piece, I think Wally's already got the plan to get us back online, was following the objectives at the end of the day, having something to show for what you did. And so while we've been concentrating on making sure the plant is a high-performance system and learning what is a high-performance system, my key learning is we've got some work maybe so we can be a high-performance system. The group is not quite there, the commitment level's there, the talent is there, but from what I saw out of my workshop, at the end of the day, or late that night, but by the next morning you had a product and you felt good and it got rid of some of those anxieties. Where are we in this process of putting something together to show what we've done? So, I don't know if there is an answer, but somehow focusing the group back on becoming